All right, let's shift now to a very interesting story. All right, so you can find them in neighborhoods all over. We're talking about these light green boxes standing just a few feet tall in between homes. Companies put them there years ago, hook them up for phone service, more recently, internet. But after a while, I mean, you forget that they're there, to be honest. But not in one Gastonia neighborhood. Homeowners say their utility boxes are standing out. They're busted. They're falling over. And neighbors fear they're potentially even more dangerous. WCNC Charlotte's Nate Borobito is here in studio. Nate, thank you for joining us. I didn't think about it until I was going over the story today, and I'm like, wow, you do forget that they're there.
You know, I was driving down the road after our photographer Pierre and I went out to this neighborhood, interviewed the folks there, and as I was driving down the road, I started seeing them everywhere. You know, I've got one in my yard. It's, I think, covered by a tree or a shrub, but I never think about it until you actually remember that they're there, and then you start looking at them. At least that's what I've been doing now, because I feel bad for people whose utility boxes have been kind of neglected and have opened up, have exposed the wires, have rusted out. I mean, one woman told us, like, and you're gonna hear from her in a minute, but like the lawnmower becomes an issue for them to mow the lawn. And honestly, when this first came to my attention, the concern was safety, because these are utility boxes. They weren't sure if they were even working anymore. They weren't sure if they had an electrical charge, live power running through them. And so that's kind of how it started out to me, because I knew they were eyesores. Like, who wants that in their front yard? And you have to remember, these don't belong to me or you. These are in the right-of-way, these utility easements, which means utility companies are solely responsible. Like, you can't move that thing. If you even tried, you'd get in trouble. Like, they would find out and you get in trouble for it because it doesn't belong to you. Wow. So anyways, you know, we talked to a couple neighbors over there in the Woodleigh neighborhood. This is in Gastonia. And really over the last couple of years, these have been a problem. But to the point recently, one of the boxes rusted out, it opened up, they're just wires hanging out all over the place. And if I were them, I'd be concerned about it, just like they were when they talked to me. And what we found out, number one, is that there is not live power running through them. Thank goodness. But also that the only way you can really get anything done about these is if the utility company agrees to do something. So maybe we can hear from a couple of the neighbors over there real quick, and then we can kind of talk a bit more about that, because that's what really surprised me, the fact that it's kind of on you to get it figured out and convince them to fix it, or to call us. And, you know, I'll tell you how it worked out when they called us, but let's listen to them first.
We're concerned, as far as not just us, but other people that may have this, that hasn't been used and hasn't been touched for, I don't know, that as far as I can remember, a number of years. And I'm just worried about its safety. I mean, aside from the fact that it's not very pretty, there are large cables back underneath it, and I'm not sure if it's energized or whatever. And I'd just like to have it removed.
That thing is awful. We have to put it together, try and put it together constantly, and it falls apart no matter what we do. When we're trying to mow the yard, it gets caught up on the lawnmowers, it gets caught up under the blades, so it really is a hazard. I don't know much about it, whether it's electrical, whether it's hot, that I could touch it or do much with it. So it is kind of scary having it in the yard and not knowing much about it, and also, you know, not knowing if I can manipulate it or not.
I mean, that's in worse shape than I thought it would be.
I tried to describe it to you, Nick. The wires were hanging out. What more can I say? Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look pretty at all. And imagine that being in your, it's not yours, it's the easement, but it's basically your yard.
Yeah.
And it's there for a long time. And I looked at the Google Street View on the street, too, and you could see the woman, Gail, you just heard from, like, hers has kind of looked like this for a year or two, it looked like to me, based on the Google Street View. So what's frustrating to these people is, number one, it exists. Number two, we've learned that it is functioning. So this was like a relic from the telephone days, first of all.
Jeez.
But then it kind of transitions to the internet, and it's actually a functioning kind of network internet piece of equipment for one of the companies in our area. But Fred Abromaitis, who you heard from a few seconds ago, He called AT&T. This is the company that owns this now. It was Southern Bell, then went to Bell South, then AT&T. That's how old this is. Like Southern Bell was in business at the time. And he called up AT&T, he tells us, and got nothing. Tried to escalate it to his supervisor, no luck. Nobody's going to do anything to help him here. So the next step for him is to talk to us and see what we can do.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking, like, whenever you do investigations, you tell folks, hey, do everything in your power to make it work before you reach out. And that's what these folks did.
Right, and here's what really surprised me. So I asked them, I said, well, have you reached out to state regulators? In this case, I figured the North Carolina Utilities Commission would regulate this company. And he hadn't yet, but what I found out is that North Carolina Utilities Commission does not regulate this phone company and dozens of others. And here's why. This is what really kind of got me. Like in 2011, state lawmakers passed a law that allowed phone companies to elect to be deregulated, so to self-regulate. Now they regulate themselves. So imagine these people call AT&T, they get no response. I tell them there's no regulation. Really the only hope is that we can get the needle moved here for them, which we did, thankfully. But I always say let us be your last resort, unless it's so egregious that there's a safety issue or there's a real imminent danger. Let's try to see if the processes that are in place can resolve this. But the truth is, in this case, there's very few processes available for people.
Wow. What and I'm sure there are many things, but what that comes to mind? What's one thing from this story that you took away from it? Like,
well, number one, I think the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, needs to be notified when stuff like this happens. Right? This is the federal regulators that do have some oversight over companies across the United States. Now, this is the federal government, so it's not hyper-local, right? But the FCC basically wants people to reach out to them whenever you have an issue with any kind of communications situation, because they want to monitor trends nationwide. And that's something that interests me. So this won't be in our story tonight at 6, but it's already online, by the way, at WCNC.com. You'll see this little nugget. I analyzed the FCC data from complaints to try to get an idea, how frequent is this? Is it on the rise? And you don't get that granular. So we don't know this specific issue. But we do know when it comes to phone and internet, in North and South Carolina, equipment only, the number of complaints reached a 10-year high last year. So since 2015, there's been more than 2,000 complaints. These are just the people that go through the process of filing complaints. Again, it could be any kind of equipment issue with their internet or their phone. This is a piece of equipment. And so I just think that's interesting that for whatever reason, equipment problems have increased in the Carolinas, over the last 10 years, especially over the last couple of years.
Is it because of age of the equipment?
It's hard to tell. I mean, look, we're in a changing period. We went from remember phone lines?
Yeah.
Like, I hate to.
No, I
remember. You had a phone line in your house. I know we did. Because I'm older than you.
You have a rotary. My grandparents had a rotary phone.
Yes, yes. So there was a phone somewhere that you used back in the day, and then we kind of switched to the internet, and then it was wireless internet, and so I think that's part of it. Like, it's just continuously changing.
Right. Yeah.
And in this case, this is a piece of equipment that Fred told me has been around as long as his home has been around. I mean, more than 30 years.
Wow.
So, this is an older piece of equipment, and I believe they're talking about his specific utility box, because his isn't the only one. But they ended up putting some electrical tape around it, put it back together, put some electrical tape around it. And I'm like, come on, that can't be a permanent fix, right? And they said, no, it's temporary. We've identified one box that needs to be replaced. So I feel pretty certain that his is kind of aged out here and needs to be replaced. They went over and they adjusted Gale's to kind of get it in more working order. But again, these people have limited control here because it's not on your property. And so that's where regulators, whether you like big regulation or small regulation or no regulation, they do play a role because they can kind of act as the mediator or the advocate for the consumer and say, hey, before we get any deeper into this situation, can we just resolve it? And something that was kind of surprising to me, Nick, initially AT&T responded quickly to me.
Yeah.
I mean, within hours, they had a crew out there with their electrical tape, putting that thing back together, right? But over the next couple weeks, really a kind of a lack of responsiveness to me about my additional questions. Is this a permanent fix? When can customers expect things to be resolved? What kind of permanent changes are you going to put in place? It wasn't until yesterday when I put a hard deadline of noon that they came through and gave me the additional information. So just imagine how much work that was for us over multiple weeks to do this. If you're a consumer, like, this is my full-time job at least.
Right.
Like, this is all I have to do when I'm at work, essentially, right? This kind of problem solving. But if you are a homeowner, maybe you have a job, maybe you're a retiree, I don't know what it is, but you can't spend that much time trying to go back and forth with a company to try to get something resolved. And I think that's the most frustrating part for these people. It shouldn't take reaching out to us. That's what I always say. It should not take people reaching out to us to get things fixed. I'm always relieved when we can help resolve something.
Right.
And in the grand scheme of things, is this the biggest issue in the world for people? No. But again, if a company is willing to ignore them when they have issues over a busted equipment box in their front yard, what else might they be willing to do?
Yeah.
There's a level of accountability and responsibility here. Just do the right thing. In this case, the company eventually did. And this isn't the first time, by the way, Nick, that we've dealt with this at WCNC with this particular company. A complaint about AT&T in 2021. A woman in Charlotte said, we've had this box in our yard. It's been busted for since we moved in, and we tried to resolve it. We had no luck. And at the time, Bill McGinty, our former colleague, was here, and he helped get it resolved quickly. So there's a bit of a history here.
Yeah.
And you just want to give people the benefit of the doubt. But when it starts becoming a repeat issue, and it takes us getting involved, to me it signals perhaps people should let the FCC know when any company does something like this. If someone feels like their concerns are diminished or ignored, the federal government should be made aware of it. Not because there's going to be a punishment or needs to be a punishment, but just so they can track it to figure out, is this a one-off or is this happening over and over again?
And I can only imagine customers, you reach out a couple of times and then you just get exhausted. Like you said, life happens. You work, you have other responsibilities, and I don't feel like reaching out anymore. I've reached out a few times.
I was actually emailing with a person in Mecklenburg County earlier this week because I'd done a story maybe 3-4 months ago about some property tax issues in Mecklenburg County where the car taxes were sometimes wrong, right? The assessed value of these cars. And I had a few people reach out to me after the story, and this one person did. And I said, here's what you should do. You should reach out to your county commissioner. You have the chance to appeal this. And I followed up with him, and he told me, honestly, I just paid it because I just didn't have the bandwidth to fight it anymore. And I think that's so common with people.
Yeah.
That's why they reach out with us to begin with. I mean, who isn't overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
I know I am all the time.
Right.
And thankfully, I have a job where I can help people, and I have access to those in power who can change things, and I have access to data and data skills that can say this isn't like a one-off here. There's a systemic issue potentially.
Man.